All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Let's start off with, I want to thank everybody for coming out. If you can, raise your hand, make sure that I can tell that you guys can hear me. So there should be a little icon over there by your name. All right, I see a couple of you guys. Perfect, thank you. Just want to make sure I'm just not talking to myself out here. All right, so wanted to talk to you a little bit about some of the enhancements in 2015. It should be a pretty brief, short little demonstration. So let's go ahead and get this thing started. So first on the control panel, a little bit of cleanup on the webinar. Make sure that you can hit the little arrow. That'll make the screen a little bit, or your control panel a little bit smaller so you can see the main part of my screen. And I'm just going to jump right into it. So I've got a little weldment structure here in SOLIDWORKS. And one of the first things that they've done is they've enhanced how you, when you go to edit the feature, how we highlight some of the different little options and stuff. So if I take a look at the little groups, you can see we've kind of made ghosted out the stuff that's not in the active group. So when we take a look at, if I select on different groups, you can see it highlights the different groups there. So that makes it a lot easier when you're, selecting and picking on different things. Make sure you're picking them in the right order. So another thing that they've done is they've changed the way that the corner treatment works. When I select on the corner treatment, it's not just these three little icons anymore. We actually list the selection set and we tell it the actual trim order that it has. Also, I can kind of pan and zoom and rotate and stuff while this dialog box is up now. So let's take a look at one that's a little bit more interesting. We're here where I have three of these little components that come together. So what happens is the last group actually gets trimmed last. So first group does not get trimmed. Second group gets trimmed on the first group, and so on and so forth. So in this case, say for instance I wanted this guy to be trimmed along with this one, then all I have to do is select on the trim order. So I'll put it down to 2. And so now you'll notice that this guy, these two are actually being trimmed off on their own. So it's kind of like doing a miter. But then they get trimmed off on trim order number 1. So pretty much the one that's on top does not get trimmed. Of course, we can cancel, get out of that dialog. So that's some nice little enhancements just on the features inside the structural members. So next, let's take a look at some of the gussets. Let me zoom in up here, and I'll just click on the gusset command. So we've had the gusset command for quite a long time, and you select on 2 faces, and it puts a little gusset in there. We can come in here and change what the size is. So I'll make this guy a 100 by 100. And doesn't seem like anything's a big deal, but in this case, I actually had a weld gap in there. So something new to 2015 is the ability that if we have weld gaps, the gussets actually jump across the weld gaps and puts them in there. So that looks pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and do a couple of these, so I'm going to thumbtack that. I'll just say OK, and that'll put me on the next one. So another nice little feature. So of course I can do it between plates and faces. So you can kind of see this one's actually jumping across a couple of different features there. I can also do it now between 2 pipes, 2 cylinders. So it's just using the tangent edges. I have these little icons that I can select. Sometimes it will get it on the wrong side, or if I have a pipe that goes into a T, then we can pick which side we want to flip it onto. So that makes it really nice and handy. Let's go and do, that looks pretty good. Go ahead and say OK out of the gusset. And let's take a look at, we've had end caps for a while. Actually, let me do one more thing on the gusset. I forgot to do this guy. So this is, I'm going to pick these 2 faces. But the problem with if I pick something cylindrical and something flat is it doesn't know which quadrant. So it needs some type of an alignment edge or an alignment face. So I'm going to select on this little edge. And then again, I get the little corner, so I can flip him either up or down. So that looks pretty good, and I'm happy with that. And that'll finish out my gussets. So I've got quite a few more gussets in there. So next, I do want to move into the end caps. You'll see I've got a little inset end cap in here. So 2015 makes this really nice and easy. We'll go to the end cap, just select on the outside face there. And we have an option for how far back we want that offset to be. So 5 millimeters, I'm going to go ahead and make it 10. And then I can use the offset value. This is the offset from the inside of the face, and I'll talk a little bit more about this in just a bit. But then I also want to put a little fillet on there and make it a 5mm fillet. So I'll go and accept the end cap, and let's do a little section view so we can kind of dig down a little bit deeper on this. So the offset value, you'll kind of see this thing is not straight up and down. It's at an angled beam. It's not horizontal or anything like that. So this one's a little tricky. So what happens is the offset value in there, I told it 1mm, actually did 1mm from this edge and 1mm from this edge. So it's pretty smart on how it actually creates these offsets and puts the nice little end caps in there. Can't beat that. So what is a weldment without the cuts list? Let's go to weld beads first before we do cuts list. So let's click on weld bead, and with weld beads we can now do between some of these plates. So main thing is you pick a face and you pick some other faces, and it's going to create a weld bead in between those two faces. So the nice thing is now these edges aren't even touching, but it goes ahead and puts the weld bead in there. The gusset is on the outside of that tangent face. So it's able to do that now. So let's go and do a new weld path. There's also some automation on when I select on two plates, then it not only gets where I selected on, but it also gets the adjacent ones. And of course we can select on the option there for both sides, so it gets on the front and the back of that. So we hold that together. So then we can do a new weld path. And sometimes you'll want to do sheet metal parts. So now we can select on a face, and then we can select on an edge, and it's going to place it at the intersection of where that face and that edge would actually meet up. So pretty nice and easy to do that. We can also sometimes when we do these, let me go and do one more. And let me get back in there. If we have a seam or something that we just need to clear up, then we can do it on that as well. This time I'm just going to do a weld path and just select on the edge. So occasionally we'll need to do that also in this case where I have multiple faces that I'm going to go across. So I can select on just the individual edges. We can also, let me go ahead and say OK to that. If I need some kind of crazy weld, or I got a guy that's really good at welding and he does it in some amazing little places and stuff, let's go ahead and turn on, I've got a sketch in here, a little 3D sketch that goes around the outside of this thing. It's kind of like a little spiral. And we can use any type of a 3D path to do weld beads on as well. So if I click on weld path and just select on that 3D sketch, and we'll say OK. And now I've got a nice little weld bead that's going around that thing. So pretty much anything that we weren't able to actually do welds on, now we can just create a 3D sketch in there. Once we do the 3D sketch, we can do a weld path. So makes it very, very nice. We can do it just about anywhere. So now let's go ahead and get into our weldments cuts list. So one of the issues that we've had is whenever we do some of the weldments, we have issues where you always have to right click on there and tell it to update. And really that's most of the time what we're going to do. So there's a new option that says update automatically. So as soon as I create my new weldment structure or cuts list item, it's going to go ahead and build the list. It's going to go ahead and put those components inside of that and organize them. So that's a nice little feature. Let's also go into, we have some options that we can deal with on this. So right now it says cuts list item, it usually goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, builds them all up. But we have some options now. If I go to my document properties, go to my weldments, you can see that we can tell it to automatically create the cuts list. So you'd want to set these in your template, so that way your template is going to be automatically create the cuts list and stuff. So you don't have to keep right clicking and say update. We can also create derived configurations, assign the configuration to description strings. And one of my favorites here is rename the cuts list folders with the descriptions. So right now it just says cuts list item. If I hit OK, now it's going to go back, find out what the descriptions of each of those guys are, and go ahead and put them in. So you can see now it makes a little bit more sense on what those guys are saying. So some of the properties that we've also kind of come in here, we've had the ability to, let's play with these plates real quick. So I want to show you this. We've always had the ability to create what's called a bounding box. So I want to show you that real quick. So if I go look at the properties on this guy, and notice that there's no real description or anything. There is a material and kind of a quantity there. But if I right click on this and tell it to generate a bounding box, then what happens is SOLIDWORKS goes in, it finds that plate, in that case it's these little guys up here. It finds out what the extents of those are, the outer envelope, the length, the width, and the thickness in this case. Makes a little 3D sketch there. And then it also gives it a bunch of properties. So if I go take a look at the properties now, notice I've got a bunch of 3D bounding box properties for thickness, width, length, and all that. I also have a new description. And of course, the description is exactly the same as it was before, and now it's actually getting its information from the length, the width, and the thickness there. So that's automatically filled out just by right-clicking and say creating bounding box. If you have a whole bunch of plates in there, you can actually do it from the very top level as well. You can edit and delete and create your bounding boxes. And that will do it for all of the different plates that are further on down. So that's some nice little functionality there. Some other functionality we got, let's take a look at the properties on this guy. Just a piece of rectangular tube. There's two new quantities. One is it actually shows you the quantity and the value there. So we can actually look at it before we actually do it on the drawing. And then notice that there's a property for the total length. And so it tells me this is the total length of all of the rectangular tube that is that size in this weldment. So the nice thing is we can add a little tag on there. So it's actually got the total length. You can see it's actually going for the prep for the total length there. Also on these gussets, if I want to tell it how many gussets I have on there, it says that there's 5. So if I actually wanted to manually count them, then there should be 5 of them in there. So these little tags make it kind of nice and consistent. And of course I can get these tags when I create the drawing as well. So sometimes when we're doing manufacturability, we have a hard time trying to find some of our components and stuff. So in this case, I've got a bunch of little chamfers, some weld prep on the bottom of these, and sometimes I want to change it or modify it. So something that we've had the ability to do is to go ahead and take some of these features and add them to our favorites folder. And what that does is if I have a very long tree, I don't have to go look in the tree anymore. It's way up here at the very top under favorites. And something nice I can do is, of course, all these guys are little chamfers. So let's go ahead and make a new folder underneath there. So we can actually add folders into folders under the favorites. So in this one, we'll call this guy Weld Prep. So I can also make one if I want to find out where all my holes are for different sizes. Then I can make a favorites folder for all my holes and stuff. So it keeps it nice and organized. Just in case some of these things may not be in the actual order, I can organize them in the favorites folder. Makes it nice and easy for going in and editing and changing some of those items, features. All right, so with that, let's go a little bit further, and I'm going to go ahead and let's save this, and let's make a quick little drawing of this. And we'll just do a B, let's do a C size. I'll drag a couple views out. A little isometric. On the isometric, of course, we got to make a Weldments cuts list. There we go. And I'm going to put these kind of down in the bottom, make them kind of small. This guy we're going to do, let's go ahead and do a little detail view. Put that down there. And then we'll go ahead and tell it to auto balloon. Looks good for that. And then since I've got these detailed and ballooned, then we'll come in here and auto balloon this guy. So that looks pretty good. So it didn't take too long. So this isn't the hard part. The hard part is actually doing all the detailing of all the individual parts and pieces and stuff. So one thing that we may want to do is a lot of times I'll take, say for instance, I want to detail out one of these little angles here. So I'm going to go ahead and just do a Control C. I'm going to copy this view. We'll go ahead and create a new sheet, and I'll just do Control V for paste. And we'll get rid of our little detail because we don't need them on this sheet. And we'll get rid of our magnet lines real quick. And maybe I just want to detail out these top pieces of tube right there. So you guys actually get to see me do a little bit of work here. Looks good. So this is my sheet where I'm going to detail those guys. The guy's going to know where to place those things. And to make those views, we go to the View Layout tab, and there's one component called a Relative View. So we select on that. What it does is it takes me into the 3D model where I can kind of pan and zoom in around. Select on the body that I want, and then I tell it what the front view is. So I'm going to pick on that. And then in this case, I'm going to tell it what the top plane is. So that looks good. We'll go ahead and say OK, and then I'll place him in there. Once he's placed in there, then of course I can start to do some of my detailing, and I can do my projected view annotation. So if I want a top view, right side, maybe an isometric out there, we can put him out there. So what if it's something that's kind of straight and flat? Maybe like one of these beams right there. So let's go ahead and do a quick little annotation on there. So he's actually item number 1. And he's in there a couple different times. So kind of the same type of format. I'm going to go ahead and do a relative view. Select the body. This time I want this guy. And this is incorrect, so I'm going to select on this. And I want him sideways, so now my top face is actually going to be over here on this. And so I can place him out there. So if I have one that's in the same orientation as this, so I've got this part, maybe I want this exact same part over here. All he is just a little bit shorter, but if I've already gone ahead and got him pretty well taken care of, then I can do a Control C, and then just pick in out in the middle nowhere and say Control V for paste. And then I'm going to go in here, tell it the body, I don't want that guy in there, I want this guy. And because the views are on the same direction and stuff, then you can kind of see I've got a different component, but the same orientation and everything. And so once I have that orientation, then of course I can go to my projected views. Go ahead and put him up here a little bit. And of course, these all came from the same assembly, so if I wanted to put balloons and stuff on them, then I can. One more balloon. All right, so of course then I have to put all the dimensions and everything else on there. So hopefully you've seen some pretty nice little enhancements, some cool things that maybe tips and tricks that you might not have known that hopefully I've covered. And that's pretty much about it. So let me go back to the PowerPoint. And if you have any questions, there's going to be a little questions pane down here. Just type in your questions. I'll be online a little bit after the webinar to make sure that I answer any of the questions that are in there. If they're pretty cool, pertinent ones, I'll publish them out to everybody so you can see them. And I'll just hang on until that. We also have, again, my name's Steve Darcy, Application Engineer at Progression Technologies. My extension's 270. If you want to get a hold of me, my email address is sdarcy@progressiontech.com. If you have tech support or anything like that, just send it to support@progressiontech.com, and we'll be happy to help you. Don't forget about coming in next week. Kim is going to be doing appearances, so talking about different ways to color your parts, make them look a little bit more realistic. And then the week after next is going to be Shane is going to get on here and talk about some of the different solutions that we have for just kind of an all-around product knowledge. All right, with that, I'm going to just go ahead and end the show. And if you have any questions, then I'll be on the questions pane. Thanks.